In the last video, we took a look at some of the basics of the pen tool. In this video, we're going to take a look at a couple of different ways of working easier and making the work you do go quicker. So we're going to start off with the pen tool here. Now you can see we're going to drag curved line, or we're going to create curved lines here. So I'm going to click and drag. So I'm going to start at 1, and the first thing I'm going to do is hold Shift. Okay, Shift is our constraining shortcut. That's going to take and lock any line that I'm creating at 0, 45, and 90 degrees. So right now I got my anchor point and my 2 grips. Now I'm going to go from 3 to 4 here, holding Shift. So now these 2 grips are exactly parallel with each other, which is giving me that nice arced curve right there. Now, normally, I would take and grab my caret tool, and I need to bring this grip downward. Okay, because my next line I want to curve downward. So if I grab that grip and bring it downward, and I go back to my pen tool, the computer sees it as me clicking off of my actual line here. So even though it's still highlighted, when I go to make my next point, it's not connecting like it should be. So anytime that you change tools, you're basically deselecting what you're working on. The way around that is by using some of the shortcuts. So I'm going to grab my pen tool. I'm still going to do my 1 to 2 holding Shift because I want that nice and constrained. 3 to 4. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to push Option. And you can see that when I push Option, it turns into the caret tool. I'm still clicked on my pen tool. It's just that that Option button is a shortcut for that caret. And now what I can do is grab that grip, bring it down to 5, and now instead of curving upward, my next line is going to curve downward. Grab that Option again, grab that grip, bring it down. When I bring it down, I'm holding Shift so that this way I know it's constrained at that same angle. So Option is the shortcut for that convert anchor point tool. Now, in this one, we got a little something different here. We're mixing straight lines with curved lines. So we're going to work on this guy right here first. Now, because we're starting off with a straight line, I'm going to click at my first point. I'm going to click at where my line ends. Now my next line coming down around here is curved, so I'm going to follow it all the way around until my curve starts coming back on itself. So it starts coming back on itself right about here. I'm going to click and drag. And all I'm looking to do is get the start of this point here looking good. I'll fix this guy up over here later on. So now it curves upward. My curve ends right around here. So I can click and drag. Now it's going to be a straight line coming over and a straight line down. So when I'm making those straight lines, I'm holding Shift. Now, the first thing you notice is that this guy here, if I grab my direct selection tool, only has 1 grip coming out of it. And the reason it has 1 grip is because this side of the line here was straight when we created it, and this side was curved. So normally we would see 2 grips, but half of this was a straight line. Now, we know that our caret tool, or the convert anchor point tool, allows us to take and move our grip around and edit our curve. Okay, but we know that it takes 2 grips to control the whole line. So the other thing that the convert anchor point tool allows us to do is regrow grips. So I could come over here by the anchor point. If I click on that anchor point with the caret tool and drag, we're regrowing the grips for that side there. Could adjust those guys up a little bit, get it to where it needs to be. Now the problem is that when I did that, I grew the grips out the other side of it too for this guy. So we don't actually need this grip here. So I could take and move this around and make it look like it goes where it's supposed to go. Or the other thing is, instead of clicking and dragging, if we just click on a grip and leave go, it's going to actually get rid of that grip. So it takes it from being a curved line to a straight line. So I could really simply get rid of grips and make something straight. Or if I need to bring those grips back, click on an anchor point and recreate them. Now, this guy up here, our curve is off because this grip here, when we were creating this side here, is really tall. So I would have to take and come in here, grab this grip, and to lessen that curve, bring it down closer towards that anchor point. Now that's looking pretty good there, but I know that there's a grip coming off this right-hand side here, so just to be careful, I'm going to get rid of that grip so that this way I know it's a straight line going across. Now, one other way of creating this is basically doing the same thing, but I'm going to change one thing up when we're going. So I'm clicking to get my straight lines. I'm going to come around here, click and drag just like we did before. Coming up here. And what I'm going to do is hold Option right now, and because I know this line is going to be too far up, as I'm working I could control this guy. Then I could draw this guy in here. Now, I know my next line is going to be straight. And right now, we got a curve because we have a handle coming out of it. So what I could do is, if I go over that last anchor point that I made, we get a little caret that shows up next to the pen tool. Now we know that if we click on a grip with our little caret or convert anchor point tool, it gets rid of that grip. This is going to do the same thing. If I click on that anchor point, that last anchor point that I made, it gets rid of that future grip. It gets rid of that grip that's controlling my next line I'm going to make. Now because there's no grip there, it's going to automatically give us a straight line. Now the only thing I got to do is come back to this point here. I'm going to regrow some grips out of here so that this way we can take and get the curve correct. And again, get rid of this guy here. Now the last thing I would do is, my line isn't quite the right thickness right now. So if I click on that line, I could take and come to my stroke, either over here or it's up at the top because it's a commonly used item. I'm going to increase it to make it the correct size. Now the clover here is another one that we're going to take and be doing. I'm going to start this the same way. I'm going to click and drag. I always want to make sure that my grips are outside of my lines that I'm creating. So if I was to do it here, my line is going to curve inside of the arc that I'm trying to draw. So I want that grip or that handle to be outside. And I'm going to come around to where my curve ends, right about here. And all I'm looking to do is get the start and end of this curve correct. So it's looking pretty here, and it's looking pretty here. Now I know that my next line is going to curve down and to the left. We know that the Option button is our shortcut for our caret tool. I'm able to take that grip or handle, drag it out the direction I want to go, and start this part here. And again, all I'm looking to do is to make this part look decent and this part look decent. And I continue going around this thing until I get the whole thing done. Now, we know that these shapes here aren't on the lines how we want them to be. So I could come in here, and no matter how much I play, no matter what I do, I'm not going to be able to take and get this curve exactly lined up with that dotted line. So we're going to need some extra anchor points in here to take and actually make the curve how we want it to be. So we got our Add Anchor Point tool here, which allows you to take and create anchor points on a line that already exists. So I could throw one in the middle of my little mess up here, one in the middle of the mess up here, and one over here. Now we also know from the first tutorial that our Direct Selection tool allows us to move those anchor points. So I could come in here, click on the anchor point, and drag it where it needs to be. I'm going to do the same for all of these. Now you can see we're a little bit off right here. So I could click on that line, grab my Convert Anchor Point tool, and I could edit these grips to get this along the curved line how I want it to be. Now the thing is that we always want to try and work from the corners. If I work from the middle, this is a middle anchor point. If I play with this guy too much, it's going to give us this ugly little hiccup in here. Okay, so whenever possible, we're always going to try to edit the curves from one of the corners. Now it's not going to always be possible to edit these curves from the corners. If we're going to take and play with the middle anchor point, it's fine. It's just that when we're taking and moving our grips or our handles, we want to make sure that the grip coming out either side, so the one coming up here and this guy that's right down over here, we want to keep those two grips parallel to each other. As soon as they start coming in at angles, that's when we create our little hiccup in the line. If we take and keep them parallel though, it keeps our curve nice and smooth. Now there's times where you might be working on it where lines just get messed up for some reason. Can't tell which grip is coming out of where. Remember that with that Convert Anchor Point tool, you could always click on an anchor point and regrow those grips. So by regrowing those grips, we're able to straighten it out and smooth it out a little bit. The last thing is that you got to remember that when we're creating objects, we don't always have to use our pen tool. You got a lot of different options here for drawing stuff. So sitting here trying to draw this perfect circle could become tedious. And because you got this one done nicely, doesn't mean the next one is going to look exactly the same. So you got to remember that if you see a shape, you still have your shapes tool over here. You could very easily come in here and using the shapes tool, create the shape to the size that you want it, and then instead of trying to redraw this guy the exact same, we're going to do a Command C, Command V, which is our copy and paste, and we can put it where it needs to be. Okay, working with shapes is always going to be a lot quicker than working with our pen tool, but we can't make every shape that we want with the shapes tool. So if you see shapes, it's always smarter and quicker to use the shapes tool if possible. Now remember that when we're working with the shapes tool, it all comes back down to those anchor points and grips. So even though this was created with the shape tool, we still have our anchor point and with the grips coming out of it. So we could still come in here with our direct selection tool and move that anchor point around. Or we could come in here with our Convert Anchor Point tool and we could adjust the curvature. So as long as you know how to use the pen tools up here and you know the anchor points and grips, there's really not much that you can't take and edit in Illustrator.